Professor Ranjit Kumar Goswami is the Srimanta Sankardeva Chair Professor at Tezpur University and one of the pioneers in establishing Sankardeva study in the country. An outstanding scholar of modern and postmodern theory and literature, an eminent and incisive critic of Assamese literature, a comprehensive analyst of social, cultural and intellectual tradition of Assam, Professor Goswami has devoted himself exclusively to the exploration of rich resources of Assamese literature, often going beyond the established canon. Professor Goswami began his teaching career in 1974 in the Department of English, Cotton College. In 1982, he joined the Department of English, Guwahati University, and since then, he has influenced generations of students with his spectacular style of teaching and prodigious memory with hundreds of lines of verse stored in mind, a living literary record from which he spontaneously calls for the text and resources in a classroom. Professor Goswami has written extensively on Assamese literature and culture. Some of his published books are Manikanta Kakoti Aro Apamor Bodhik Itiha, 1995, Reading Sankardeva, Marginality and Indianness, 2005, Prabandha, 2016, a recent collection of essays spanning more than 2 decades with a wide array of subjects, from the tradition of Sankardeva to the 19th century literature, from post-colonial intellectual history of Assam to the reception of select modern texts. Manikanta Kakoti, The Man and His Works, 1988, Onnanna Prabandha, Muni Gorbachi Miscellany, 1995, Essays on Sankardeva, 1996 are some of his edited works. He was the chief editor of Katha Literary Journal and Katha Guwahati. Today, Professor Goswami will be delivering the lecture titled Communication and Understanding, Prufrock 1917. Please join me in welcoming Professor Goswami with a big round of applause.
Thank you so much, Sambhavika. And let me tell you that whatever Professor Saikia, Vice Chancellor of the University, had said on T.S. Eliot was of such a comprehensive nature. I have no hesitation in saying that this was perhaps the best talk on T.S. Eliot from any Vice Chancellor of any Indian university. But they are kind of Vice Chancellor. Sir, what I'll be saying would only be a series of footnotes to whatever you have said already. By the way, it was Professor A.M. Whitehead who, in a little book, he is already distinguished for his book Principia Mathematica and all that. Science at the bottom wall, that he was talking about Plato, and he said that subsequent philosophers only could add some footnotes to the philosophy of Plato. He was such an original thinker that the other philosophers could only try to add some footnotes to his philosophy. So my lecture will also be a series of footnotes to whatever Professor Saikia has already said. So it's we are celebrating the centenary of Prufrock and Other Observations, obviously in June 1917. A collection of 12 poems. Already Professor Saikia said a good deal about the central poem, central quote unquote, the love song of the Alfred Prufrock, and we had also the recitation of the poem by our student here. So 12 different types of poems, 12 poems. Are they a kind of response to the 19th century? This is the central question. There is so much of laughter. In fact, there is a poem called Mr. Apollinax, which is on Barton Russell, which refers to what Barton Russell did at Harvard. Incidentally, at Harvard, Barton Russell was T.S. Eliot's teacher. And Barton Russell was always known for his loud and raucous laughter, particularly in the common room. So it is the laughter of Barton Russell that is also subtly represented There is a poem called Hysteria, so hysterical laughter. So is laughter a kind of response to the 19th century idea of high seriousness? As you all know, it was Meshu Arnold who said that one great characteristic of poetry is its high seriousness. He invoked Aristotle and he said that according to Aristotle, high seriousness is what characterizes great poetry. And this Victorian idea of high seriousness, incidentally, was something that came to be challenged in the writings of T.S. Eliot. This Victorian idea of high seriousness. You are a serious man. Serious means solemn. And you don't either look either left or right. You don't smile. You remain at a right angle to the universe. It was Ian Foster who said there are some people who stand at a right angle to the universe. Right angle is 90 degrees. You stand at a right angle to the universe. Very stiff. Don't either look left or right. Don't smile. Be serious. So it is this kind of seriousness which came to be challenged by T.S. Eliot. He said that, okay, there is no reason why you shouldn't also add a kind of frivolity. A certain degree of frivolity is quite in order. A certain kind of laughter is also quite in order. And as has been pointed out by the Vice Chancellor himself, all this was a kind of reaction to the 19th century. And the 19th century means quite a good deal. 19th century means the Romantics, the Victorians. 19th century to a certain extent also means the Edwardians and the Georgians. 19th century meaning high seriousness, 19th century meaning a kind of emotionalism, 19th century meaning sentimentality, tears, idle tears, I know not what they mean, tears from the depth of some divine despair, rise in the heart and gather to the eyes, etc., etc. It was Tennyson, the poet laureate. You weep so much that you can't even speak. Tears, idle tears, I know not what they mean. And it is the very romantic idea of self-expression that was there till Georgian poetry. It was simple poetry, simple, quote-unquote, simple poetry, and in contrast, what T.S. Eliot was insisting on was a complex kind of poetry, because he thought that this kind of simple lyricism will not be able to do justice to the complexity of the modern civilization. There is a particular paragraph in his essay on metaphysical poetry. Our civilization comprehends great variety and complexity. Great variety in complexity. You are not living in the age of Chaucer, nor are you living in the age of Wordsworth. It is late 19th century or the 20th century. Things are different. Things are much more complex. Our civilization comprehends great variety and complexity. And this variety and complexity, playing upon a refined sensibility, must produce very complex results, various and complex results. And then he said, much in the same breath, the poet must be more difficult. So difficulty was what was insisted on. You must be more difficult. To force, to dislocate if necessary, language into the meaning. So you must even be prepared to do violence to the syntactic structure of your own language, because the older kind of syntax may not be able to do justice to the kind of complexity you are trying to represent. Our civilization comprehends great variety and complexity. Incidentally, it was not this variety and complexity you found in the poetry of the Victorians, nor in the poetry of the Edwardians and the Georgians. So he started writing a different kind of poetry. And the shift from the romantic kind of simplicity to the modern kind of complexity was very much in evidence. Simplicity to complexity, from lyricism to a kind of dramatic structure. Simplicity, lyricism, the traditional kind of lyricism, break, etc. Or tears, idle tears. Or for example, the shift from a determined pattern, predetermined kind of verse. Yeah, we are all accustomed to this predetermined kind of verse. Everything can be counted. There is a regular beat, for man may come and man may go, but I go on forever. And then the shift to the colloquial. Let us go then even die. When the evening is spread out against the sky like a patient picturized up on a table. So let us come to Prufrock later. There are poems like, for example, Preludes. Preludes is an important poem because it was what Tagore also responded to. In the year 1932, he wrote one magnificent essay called Adunik Kabbo, which is now available in English translation. There is a 4-volume translation of Tagore's works, brought out by Oxford University Press, edited by Professor Sukanta Chaudhary. And there is that essay, Adunik Kabbo, translated into English by Professor Sapan Chakraborty. Actually, the Porichoy group of writers had requested Tagore to write a few lines on Eliot. Eliot was quite a new force in English poetry at the time, and Tagore had all sorts of misgivings. Tagore had all sorts of doubts about what is called modernity in poetry. And he associated modernity with a kind of very cynical attitude to life. Cynicism, gross cynicism. And he wrote this essay where we find a Bengali translation of many of the lyrics, many of Eliot's poems, including Preludes and The Journey of the Magi. Prelude you are all familiar with. Just see how poetry became rather different. We are already familiar with the poetry of either Matthew Arnold or Tennyson, but then here it's a different kind of poetry. Of course, lots of things also started happening. There are two different things, the French symbolist movement and imagism. Incidentally, I think it was in the year 1910 that he could read a book he had always referred to in his prose, Arthur Symon's The Symbolist Movement in Literature. It was this book which introduced Eliot to the writings of Baudelaire, Rimbaud, Lafog and others. And let me tell you that as in the case of Chaucer, for example, there is also a French period in Eliot's works. And Prufrock and Other Observations, it belongs to T.S. Eliot's French period. French means Lafog, Jules Lafog. And incidentally, I think it was Ajit who translated a number of Lafog poems in Japanese. Jules Lafog and also to a certain extent Baudelaire. In a sense, you can say that this Prufrock and Other Observations, 1917, had brought or dragged English poetry, dragged is perhaps the word, dragged English poetry into the 20th century. Suddenly, poetry became European poetry. English poetry suddenly became European poetry. Thomas Hardy wrote English poetry, Tennyson wrote English poetry, Wordsworth and others wrote English poetry. But this is the first voice of a European poet. Europe, the idea of Europe. As has been pointed out by Professor Secchia, Dante is very much there. So Dante, who wrote in Italian, then French, for example, Lafog, Baudelaire, lots of things are there. Forced to dislocate, if necessary, language into the meaning. So, as I said, the shift from the lyrical to the dramatic, such a complex kind of mind. And you don't know who this Prufrock is, a very unromantic name. And you don't associate a love song with such an unromantic person. J. Alfred Prufrock. There are people who would point out that T.S. Eliot himself signed his name as T. Stans Eliot. Stans was the surname of his mother. T. Stans Eliot. So it could be also play on his own name. T. Stans Eliot. J. Alfred Prufrock. Could be. The love song of J. Alfred Prufrock. The love song of T. Stans Eliot. Okay. So French side of the story, Italian is represented by Dante, and there is another voice. That is of Raskolnikov, Crime and Punishment, Dostoevsky, Crime and Punishment. As he was reciting this poem, I was taking note of one line, trying to murder and greed, murderer, Raskolnikov the murderer. So this Prufrock could also be Dostoevsky's Raskolnikov. Incidentally, it was, I think, in the year 1945, just a few years, okay, he died in 65, but then it was in 1945, one American professor wrote one essay on the influence of Dostoevsky. Nowadays, incidentally, all the collected writings of Eliot are available in standard critical editions, right from the essays he had written in the first decade of the 20th century, the syllabus he had prepared for his Harvard days, or even when he was a school teacher at London, he made the syllabus. Okay, all this is available in critical editions. I have no doubt in making one statement. He is perhaps the most scholarly poet, English poet, after Milton. Okay, we all know that Coleridge was also a man who read so much. But then Coleridge was a very unsystematic kind of thinker and reader. Milton was a man of prodigious scholarship, of course, a scholarship of a different kind. And next is T.S. Eliot, a man of prodigious intellect and phenomenal verbal memory. Man of prodigious intellect. He had access, much like K.K. Hemming, he had access to several European languages. Very fluent in French, he knew German, he knew Italian, he read Dante in Italian, and many other languages. In Harvard, he also read a good deal of Sanskrit. So, a man of prodigious intellect. Now, some of the collected writings of T.S. Eliot are now available on the net, particularly these critical editions. So, I am particularly addressing my students. Please try to access these volumes and familiarize yourself with the kind of prodigious scholarship characteristic of T.S. Eliot. Prodigious intellect, phenomenal verbal memory, and he was very keen to derive everything from just about every culture. It was not sort of thing that I said that English poetry suddenly became European, French, German. Okay, there is also a German part. He knew German. And in his Harvard dissertation, there are frequent references to the German thinkers, including Hegel and Kant. Knowledge and experience in the philosophy of F.H. Bradley, that was his Harvard dissertation. And okay, the other day I was talking to Prof about one Austrian thinker called Alexius Meinong, M-E-I-N-O-N-Z. Alexius Meinong, there are frequent references to Alexius Meinong, to whom Barton Russell had replied in his 1905 essay on denoting. Mind, incidentally, Cotton College is perhaps one of the few colleges in India that has in its library the old editions of Mind. And incidentally, there is one Assam gentleman who also contributed a paper in the 70s, and his name is Professor Mrinal Medi. Right from Barton Russell to Mrinal Medi, all his papers are there in these volumes. Anyway, on denoting. So, the German side is also represented by one historian called Oswald Spengler, who wrote this book, Decline of the West. So I would like to relate this Prufrock and Other Observations to the civilizational discourses of the time. Civilizational discourses. And let me now go into the questions of when it all started. Because in the 17th century, we find a group of scholars in Netherlands trying to talk about civilization, trying to prepare a chronology of different civilizations. 17th century. And some of the scholars were Joseph Justus Scaliger. Scaliger was perhaps the greatest Renaissance scholar who tried. It was such a gigantic task, prepare a chronology of different civilizations. We now have some ideas about the chronology of civilizations. But then during the 17th century, people had idea about the civilizations, but not the chronology. He established the chronology on the basis of the study of eclipses, on the study of old papers obtained from other centuries. So the civilizational discourse And in the early 20th century, this German school teacher called Oswald Spengler wrote this book, Decline of the West. Much later, not much later, maybe within a decade, Arnold Toynbee, the British historian, wrote his study of history. So what is common to Spengler and Toynbee is the very perception of the decline of the West. Decline. Till the other day, the West defined itself in terms of its supremacy. West. So much so that the whole world came to be divided into two parts, West and the rest. The West is what is supreme, and the rest. So this is the beginning of a new kind of discourse, and whether it is The Wasteland, published in 1922, or J. Alfred Prufrock, they are best read as part of the civilizational discourses of the time. Let me tell you that even in Assam, we practiced, we also participated in this kind of discourse. There is, for example, that great essay by K.K. Hendik on Sumerian civilization, Prasin Babylon or Ved, that is on Sumerian civilization. And it was right from the later decades of the 19th century that works on Sumeria started. And particularly following the excavation works of the French archaeologist François Lenormand, this developed in the West, Sumeria. And here in India, Bal Gangadhar Tilak and others started relating the Indian civilization, particularly the Vedic civilization, to Sumerian civilization. So these are aspects relating to the civilizational discourses of the time. So let me say that the German side is represented by the civilizational discourses, represented among others by Oswald Spengler and to a certain extent by Arnold Toynbee. French part is represented by Baudelaire, Rimbaud, and most importantly, Lafont. Lafont, for example, Lafont's poetry is full of irony. And it was Ajit Barua who in Assam taught us the Lafontian mode. Okay, you are saying one thing, for example, I am trying to say something, and at the same time I am trying to listen to my own voice at work. This is not merely self-expression. I am trying to express certain, I am struggling to express certain things, but at the same time I am also trying to hear my own voice. So it's a progress retreat kind of movement that characterizes even the love song of the Alfred Prufrock. Let us go to you and I. When the evening is spread out against the sky, like a patient, each lies upon a table. Let us go through certain half-deserted streets, the muttering retreats of restless nights in one-night hotels and sawdust restaurants with oyster shells, streets that follow like a tedious argument of insidious intent to lead you to an overwhelming question. Oh, do not ask what is it, let us go and make our visit. So different a kind of verse. Different in the sense that there is no regular pattern here. Unlike in the poetry of Tennyson, for man may come and man may go, this was what the images called the regular kind of beat, characteristic of a metronome. Characteristic. Okay, you can even play the tabla with some of the poems. Like for example, Jotin Dora. Nauriya Melidia, Naukonimur, Nisakoe, Asabatsai, Kuna Sekenimur, Ahikakoloi, Senehore Dibohi Bidai. Okay, since I'm addressing my students now, 1917 saw the publication of Prufrock and Other Observations. 1913 was the year takeoff of the Nobel Prize for Gitanjali. And you are all familiar with Tagore's Gitanjali, whether in Bengali or English. Let me first try to focus on some of the poems of Tagore and then come to Eliot. And you will see why Tagore was so angry with this new voice called T.S. Eliot. আমার মাথা নত করে দাও হে তোমার চরণ ধুলার তোলে, সকল অহংকার হে আমার ডুবাও চোখের জলে। আমারে না যেন করিয়া প্রচার আমারও আপন কাজে, তোমারই ইচ্ছা করবে পূর্ণ আমার জীবন মাঝে, যাতে তোমার চরম শান্তি, পরাণে তোমার পরম কান্তি, আমারে আড়াল করিয়া দাঁড়াও হৃদয় পদ্ম ডালে দলে, সকল অহংকার হে আমার ডুবাও চোখের জলে। Or one after another, আমি বহু বাসনায় প্রাণপণে চাই। This is one of my favorite poems. আমি বহু বাসনায় প্রাণপণে চাই, বঞ্চিত করে বাঁচালে মোরে। I wanted to be the chief minister of Assam. I couldn't, and oh God, I'm thankful to you. You deprived me of all this. I'm really grateful. আমি বহু বাসনায় প্রাণপণে চাই, বঞ্চিত করে বাঁচালে মোরে, এই কৃপা কঠোর সঞ্চিত মোর জীবন ভরে। না চাহিলে মোরে যা করেছ দান, আকাশ আলো তনু মানো মন প্রাণ, দিনে দিনে তুমি নিতেছ আমায় সে মহাদানের যোগ্য করে, অতি ইচ্ছার সংকত হতে বাঁচায় মোরে। Or for example, you are all familiar with the poetry of Tagore, গ্রাম ছাড়া ওই রাঙা মাটির পথ। So this is what is common to any kind of organic society, organic quote unquote. Gram chhara oi ranga matir pot. I think Sanghamitra is also from Centennial, and I think Kusal has also some Centennial connection because his wife stays there. Our MKD sir also referred to Gerua Boiragi Mati of Centennial. Gram chhara oi ranga matir pot. Wonderful. Such a great representation of the village life in Centennial. Gram chhara oi ranga matir pot. What do you find here in Prufrock? Streets that follow like a tedious argument of insidious intent. Gram chhara oi ranga matir pot. Simple. Then streets that follow like a tedious argument of insidious intent. Okay, so different. Yes. Different from the simple lyricism of the earlier times. Different from just about everything. Simple, complex, country life, urban life. So urban disillusionment, for example. And the kind of loneliness. Lonely man in short sleeves leaning out of windows. There are some moving situations in Prufrock. For example, you are suffering from a terrible kind of loneliness. You are living in a modern city. High-rise blocks are there. Blocks that T.S. Eliot had referred to in Preludes. City blocks. His soul stretched tight across the skies that fade behind the city block. You want to have a glimpse of the blue sky overhead, but you can't because there are city blocks which obstruct your vision. His soul stretched tight across the skies that fade behind the city block, or trampled by insistent feet at 4 and 5 and 6 o'clock, etc. So it's a different kind of life altogether. Different from the kind of representation characteristic of earlier poets, including even Thomas Hardy. And lonely man in short sleeves. So you would like to be with your friend for an hour or so, and you go to meet him somewhere, and he stays there in the 7th floor. And when you go there, you find that his room is under lock and key. So disappointed, frustrated, you turn back and descend the stair with a bald spot in the middle of my hair. Time to turn back and descend the stair with a bald spot in the middle of my hair. So these are representations unique in history. And every line is so loaded. Loaded is, okay, just about every line. And you don't know who this Prufrock is. You don't know whether it is a conversation between a middle-aged lover and his so-called beloved. You don't know whether Prufrock is speaking to himself. You don't know whether it is a potential murderer who is the speaker of the poem. Let us go then live and die. When the evening is spread out against the sky, spread out, laid out or spread out, and the central image is that of a patient Israelite upon a table. Who is this patient? Is it Prufrock himself? Or is he re-examining himself? Is he examining or re-examining himself? Let us go then live and die. When the evening is spread out against the sky, spread out. Perhaps it is best to read the poem not as a kind of conversation or a dramatic monologue. Perhaps it is best to see the poem as representing a kind of zone of consciousness. This was what Hugh Kenner had said, I think in the 60s or the 50s. It's a zone of consciousness, and the single lines may not mean anything as such, but then it is the mutual play that means a lot. For example, one line may not mean anything specific, but then it is the mutual play of meanings. And play is one issue central to the Prufrock group of poems. Play as a kind of counterblast to the Arnoldian idea of high seriousness. That high seriousness. You don't either look left or right. Okay, look at the universe. Like E.M. Foster said, you stand at a right angle to the universe. Straight. Look straight. Don't smile. Be serious. Be solemn. But then, here, an element of levity, something that he also insisted on in his essays on metaphysical poetry. Essays means he wrote one essay called metaphysical poetry, another on Andrew Marvell. In both these essays, he insisted on combination of seriousness with levity. And he said that this element of levity may incidentally intensify the high seriousness sought to be represented. Seriousness. It is all a serious matter. I lead you to an overwhelming question. Oh, do not ask. Then again, the kind of verse structure. What kind of verse is it? You call it free verse? To what extent is it free? Incidentally, it was in the year 1917 that he wrote an essay on what the French call vers libre, verse libre. In college days, we call it verse libre, V-E-R-S-L-I-B-R-E, free verse. So what kind of free verse is it? That rhymes everywhere. Let us go then even I, when the evening is spread out against the sky, sky, like a patient is raised upon the table. Let us go through certain half-deserted streets, the muttering retreats. And since I was talking about the presence of Dostoevsky, and incidentally to me, he is the greatest novelist the world has seen so far. None can go beyond Dostoevsky, I can tell you, in plumbing the depth of the human unconscious. And it was this Dostoevsky he read over and over again. Being goaded by one friend called Fournier, Fournier, who had introduced him to the novels of Dostoevsky. There are several references to Dostoevsky in some of the early writings of T.S. Eliot. He read them. He read his novels, not only Crime and Punishment, but also The Protest and also Brothers Karamazov. So 4 or 5 of his novels. Of course, this gentleman who wrote in 1945 about the possible influences of Dostoevsky on T.S. Eliot said that maybe he made use of the Constance Garnett translation. But T.S. Eliot said that he was not familiar with the translation of Constance Garnett, but the other translations also point to much the same thing, because I think since he was reciting the poem, he just remembered, would it have been worthwhile after all? Would it have been worthwhile? Okay, these are sentences you find in Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. These sentences are almost bodily lifted from Dostoevsky. Would it have been worthwhile after all? Would it have been worthwhile? And the repetitions abound. There are so many repetitions, all true. No, I am not Prince Hamlet, nor was I meant to be. I am an attendant lord, one that will do well to swell the progress, start a scene or two, etc., etc. No doubt an easy tool. Almost at times ridiculous, almost at times the fool. Is there any fool in Hamlet? No. Fool is there only in King Lear. There is one fool in Hamlet, he is not a living fool, he is dead. He is Yorick. Just remember that scene, Hamlet holding Yorick's towel, Yorick. At times almost ridiculous. Almost at times the fool, I grow old, I shall wear the bottoms of my trousers rolled. Wonderful poem. such a new voice in English poetry, and I have been telling you all the time, English poetry suddenly became European with this publication, European. And T.S. Eliot all the time referred to the European mind, Europe, how Europe is there. And as it has been pointed out by the Vice Chancellor himself, Dante is very much there, not only in the epigraph to Prufrock and Other Observations, but also here. And insofar as the epigraph to the collection of poems is concerned, there is a man called Xamaj, who was junior to T.S. Eliot by 1 year. Eliot was born in, more than 1 year. I think he was born in 1890. Eliot was born in 1888. Xamaj, who died in action during the war, it is this Xamaj the book is dedicated to. And lots of people have written extensively about Xamaj, but one thing is to be noted, he was a medical student. He was a medical student who had a great interest in poetry. He read the poems of Malame and particularly Jules Lafaux. And T.S. Eliot dedicated this book to Xamaj. And incidentally, the lines quoted point to another direction. This is Dante talking about 3 epic poets. Statius, I think there is a reference to Statius in one of K.K. Hendrick's essay. Statius, then Virgil and Dante. Both these 3 poets, epic poets are there. And Dante is talking to Statius about the importance of Virgil. And Statius listens to Dante absorbingly, and then Dante says that, okay, Virgil is here. Then he suddenly tried to touch Virgil's feet. Oh, Virgil, all the time I have been trying to follow you. But then his feet cannot be touched because he doesn't have any substance. It is only the soul of Virgil who is there. So when Statius got to know that it was Virgil who was there, he immediately wanted to touch his feet, kiss his feet, but he is not there. So, almost a kind of man without substance. There is a book by Musil, the great German writer, Man Without Substance. And T.S. Eliot also wrote this poem called The Hollow Man. We are the hollow man, we are the stuffed man. So is it an existentialist poem, by the way? Or is it stream of consciousness that we talk about so much? Is it stream of consciousness? Let us go to you and I. And how do we account for some of the passages? Particularly the fog, the yellow fog that rubs its back upon the window panes, the yellow smoke that rubs its muzzle on the window panes, licked its tongue into the corners of the evening, let fall upon its back the soot that falls from chimneys, etc., etc. T.S. Eliot was very fond of cats, and he also wrote a book called Old Assam's Book of Practical Cats, which is the body of poems full of play, and play is what I will be talking about now. Play is what Ajit Barua also introduced to Assamese poetry, play. I have already talked about the Arnoldian idea of high seriousness. Remain stiff, no play, nothing. But here, play is what is insisted on. And by the way, play is something that philosophers have also talked about down the ages, particularly in the 20th century. And I don't know, since the chairman of AALAP himself is a philosopher, I am drawing his attention to one aspect. When we come to the 20th century, we find a kind of reaction to all sorts of deterministic philosophies of 19th century, all sorts of determinisms. Determinism, okay, you may say that, okay, this is the central problem. Head. Others may point out, no, the problem lies here, the heart. Marx may say that the problem lies here, the tummy, hunger, and so on and so forth. All sorts of determinisms. So 20th century is supposed to be a kind of reaction to all these determinisms characteristic of the 19th century. Maybe play was a kind of response to all sorts of determinisms characteristic of the 19th century. Play. There is a book by Johann Huizinga, and I am particularly drawing the attention of the students. All of our students must have read the small book we also read in our college days, Love Story by Eric Segal. There is a reference to this book, The Waning of the Middle Ages by Johann Huizinga. It is that Huizinga who wrote a book called Homo Ludens, L-U-D-E-N-S, Homo Ludens, the playful human. We try to come to terms with life through play. I play with my brother, whether it is cricket or football or whatever, and I try to come to terms with life through play. There are all sorts of definitions of human beings: Homo faber, Homo sapiens, Homo ludens, and from the word ludens we have ludic. Ludic that characterizes so much of the postmodern. And postmodern ludic is what T.S. Eliot anticipates in his early poetry, the ludic. So you introduce an element of play. There is another book by Roger Caillois, who was an Argentine writer, very close to Borges and others, also Victoria Ocampo. He also produced a book on play, man, play and games, play. And when we come to the 20th century, for example, we hear all sorts of philosophers talking about play out games. Wittgenstein talking about language games. Or for example, in the 60s, Derrida talking about structure, sign and play. So can we say that it was T.S. Eliot who anticipated so much of these developments? And incidentally, in the poem Prufrock itself, you have one line: it is impossible to say just what I mean, but as if a magic lantern through the nerves in patterns on the screen. It is impossible to say just what I mean. Do these lines try to sum up the kind of discourse we already had from the early 20th century? The discourse that began with the 1905 essay by Barton Russell on denoting. It is impossible to say just what I mean. And you find the American poets, for example, Archibald MacLeish, talking about the impossibility of meaning. A poem should not mean, it can only be. So why do you bother about meaning all the time? So you get I give you a poem, and the moment you get it, you start bothering about the poem. What is it about? Okay, why should it be about? Why should it be about? So a poem is a poem, and be content with the existence of the poem. Why bother about its meaning? So do we raise such questions on other occasions? For example, what does the light mean? What does the fan mean? Okay, why should a poem mean? It is Archibald MacLeish or poetry. A poem should not mean, it can only be. So it is impossible to say just what I mean, but as if a magic lantern through the nerves in patterns on the screen. Okay, he is struggling to articulate himself, and he says that, and he thinks that he is retarded at every attempt. It is impossible to say just what I mean. The struggle is going on, but then to no effect. Let us go through certain half-deserted streets, and then you don't come to the point. The yellow fog that rubs its back upon the window panes. Or for example, I have known the arms already. Okay, you can talk about Freudian desire and all that. I have known the arms already, arms that are braceleted and white and bare. Okay, Freud could be there. And incidentally, I have already talked about the importance of laughter and playful, hysterical laughter particularly. There is that poem, Hysteria, is very much a part of the anthology, Hysteria. And since Tagore translated this poem, let us try to recall this, because this is one of the major poems of the love song of the Alfred Prufrock. It is about winter evening. You don't know what it is about. these are representations of different aspects of city life. The winter evening settles down with smell of sticks in passageways. 6 o'clock. Okay, you are so much conscious of time. 6 o'clock. The burnt out ends of smoky days, and now a gusty shower wraps the grimy scraps of withered leaves about your feet and newspapers from vacant lots. The showers beat on broken lines and chimney pots, and at the corner of the street, the lonely cab horse steams and stumps, and then the lighting of the lamps. Second stanza, the morning comes to consciousness of faint, stale smell of beer from the sawdust trampled streets. With all its muddy feet that press to early coffee stands, with the other masquerades, the time resumes. One thinks of all the hands that are raising dingy shades in 1,000 furnished rooms. You toss the blanket from the bed. Okay, this is obviously the representation of a call girl. You toss the blanket from the bed. You lay upon your back and waited. You dodged and watched the night revealing the 1,000 sordid images of which your soul was constituted. They flickered against the ceiling, and when all the wall came back and light crept up between the shutters, and you heard the sparrows in the gutters, you had such a vision of the street as the street hardly understands, etc. But let me now focus on the other stanza. His soul stretched tight across the skies that fade behind the city block, or trampled by insistent feet at 4 and 5 and 6 o'clock. Block. This is also Eliot's response to what can be called the tyranny of straight lines, characteristic of 19th century architecture. Now, we define postmodern architecture in terms of a kind of reaction against the tyranny of straight lines, characteristic of earlier type of architecture. And, okay, Eliot reacted in this way. So these are some of the issues, and I made some general observations so far. Europe, the idea of Europe, idea of Dante, idea of Virgil, idea of Christianity also. Let me now talk about the influences of T.S. Eliot. And it was 1951, it was the year 1951 that saw the publication of Navokanda Barua's He Aranya He Mahanagar. And under the influence of Eliot, Assamese poetry became suddenly modern Assamese poetry. 1951. He Aranya He Mahanagar. But for a more effective appropriation of the technique of T.S. Eliot, we will have to wait for another decade and wait till the arrival of Ajit Barua. And I have already quoted a few lines from Jotin Gora, Nauriya Melidia Nau Khonimur, Misagoe Asabatsai, Kuna Sekeni. This is self-expression. Then you see, and her war olopage, Ami Huon Hirit Porilu. Our Huon Hirit Team Parire Amar Naur Team Gualu. Ami Ondo Bissahi. কেবল আমার অন্ধবিশ্বাস যদি নিরন্ধ্র অন্ধ হতেন. So cultivation of the racy colloquial idiom that characterized the Imagist movement. The Imagist manifesto 1913 talked about the importance of concentration in poetry, the importance of the use of free verse. So free verse steers clear of any regular pattern. But then it was the 1917 essay on free verse that T.S. Eliot said that there is no verse like free verse. There are only 3 kinds of verses. One is good verse, bad verse, and chaos. So this was 1917. Note his observations on Ware Liber. Good verse, bad verse. Because in the love song of Alfred Prufrock, you find so many rhymes. Continue till the end. Streets, let us go to live and die when the evening is spread out against the sky, and so on and so forth till the end. And it's a long poem. As I said, this is neither a kind of conversation nor a dramatic monologue, but then it unmistakably points to a kind of zone of consciousness and it is as if the poet is trying to subject himself to a rigorous scrutiny. You are no longer interested in expressing yourself, but in examining whatever you have to articulate. I would like to pause here a while and like to invite your questions, if any. And the questions, you are free. You can be bilingual, as I can be bilingual, or even trilingual. I would like to take some questions. I'll have a glass of water and then I'll start interacting with you. Thank you so much.